The Quran says that the moon was split in two. This was allegedly a miracle performed by the Prophet Muhammad to prove his prophethood to the Quraysh, who demanded a sign. This event is not considered a metaphor to Muslims, but a real miracle. Muslims attest that the moon literally split in two parts, and then it rejoined. Muslims love to say the splitting of the moon was another miracle from Allah, so that he could convince the disbelievers that Islam is the truth. But there is a huge problem with this. If the moon was really split, then we'd expect corroborating physical and non-Muslim evidence from other cultures at the time. Whenever Muslims are confronted with critics who ask for historical evidence, they love to make a certain claim. Muslims love to bring up some obscure record about an Indian king who converted to Islam from Buddhism, but this of course has been proven to be an inauthentic record. The earliest known written account of this story appears to be from much later periods in the 16th and 17th centuries, so this king was not even alive at the time. There are no known contemporary records from the 7th century, which is when Muhammad lived, mentioning this event or the king's conversion. Different versions of the legend exist, which suggests it may have evolved over time. But more than that, for someone to claim that the moon was split, you need to bring evidence outside of Islam to prove it. And it needs to be outside of Islam, since this was a huge worldwide event that would have been seen by thousands of people. Depending on the time it happened during the night, countries in Europe, Israel, North Africa, India, or Japan would have seen it. Even late at night, there would have been people awake to witness the event, like night watchmen, travelers, shepherds tending to their flocks, sailors, or fishermen at sea. Or how about people who just happened to be awake? Someone would have written it down on a stone somewhere. Too bad there are no reliable non-Islamic records of such an event. So how do Muslims confront this issue? Well, instead of admitting that this story is clearly bogus, they double down. Muslims love to say that the reason why the splitting of the moon wasn't seen by everyone is because Allah didn't want anyone else to take credit for it. Instead, they say that the moon splitting was only visible for the people in the context. But for everyone else, Allah made it appear like a normal sunny day. The reason for this? Because the people of the world can't link it to the Prophet, of course. Another thing Muslims love to say is that it could have been the case that the people were just sleeping during this insane event. Yeah, I don't think so, bro. This introduces more problems than it solves. The argument that others might claim credit doesn't hold up, because a truly global miracle would be more likely attributed to a divine source rather than a person. Any random person could easily wake up one day and claim that they caused the rising of the sun, for example. Obviously, no one would believe that, no matter what century you live in. People would definitely attribute it as a divine event. The argument that people from distant countries couldn't link the miracle to Muhammad, therefore Allah hid it from them, also doesn't hold up. When the flood came in Noah's time, all nations experienced it, but not all nations could attribute it to Noah. Yet we have records from ancient civilizations that tell legendary stories of a great flood similar to the account in the Bible. Why would Allah make the moon appear normal for everyone? The idea of deliberately hiding a miracle from most of humanity seems at odds with the Islamic concept of God's universal message. Plus, the Quran describes the moon splitting as a clear sign, clearly for the disbelievers, not as a hidden event. But wait, do Muslims hear this and take this story with a grain of salt? No, they triple down. Muslims claim that if anyone did write it down, it's completely possible that they just didn't preserve it, simply because the moon split in half and quickly came back together again. So yeah, basically no reason at all to freak out. No big deal. It just happened, and then it didn't happen. So there's not much reason for anyone to preserve a document about that.
What?
Another well thought out argument Muslims like to make is that if the Prophet was a fake prophet, why would he make this story up? How could people believe if it didn't really happen? Or how could the Prophet convince all the Sahaba and all the disbelievers that this happened? That's just it. He simply couldn't. Not without Allah's help. Therefore, it must have happened because Allah knows best, and Muhammad was his prophet. Sorry, but the claim that people wouldn't preserve records of such an event is highly unlikely. Extraordinary celestial events were widely recorded in ancient times. Cultures around the world kept detailed astronomical records, including eclipses and comets. A moon-splitting event would have been unlike any event ever recorded in history. Even if the moon was put back together the same night, it would have certainly been recorded. The argument that either Muhammad was a true prophet or he fabricated this story is a false dichotomy because it only presents two options. But there are other possibilities, such as sincere misinterpretation of natural phenomena, or the story could have just evolved over time. This option is much more likely in my opinion. Many people throughout history have believed extraordinary claims without empirical evidence. The ability to convince followers doesn't necessarily prove the truth of a claim. And if this event convinced all the Sahaba and all the disbelievers, we would expect widespread contemporary accounts, including from non-Muslim sources. Yet this evidence is lacking. In contrast, if we compare the event of the resurrection of Jesus, there is more supporting evidence for this event than the splitting of the moon. Although the resurrection of Jesus isn't directly confirmed by any contemporary non-Christian sources, it makes sense because the New Testament records that Jesus appeared to a handful of people after his resurrection. Since this wasn't a worldwide event like the splitting of the moon, we wouldn't expect to find ancient Roman or Greek historians saying that this happened, because the risen Jesus never appeared to them. Instead, we'd expect to find records of Roman or Greek historians telling us that Christians believe that this happened, which we do have. Now, if we compare the crucifixion of Jesus with the Quran splitting of the moon, this would be a more accurate comparison because both events would have been a widely known event that outside sources could confirm. Obviously, we don't have any outside sources confirming the splitting of the moon, but we do have outside non-Christian sources confirming the crucifixion of Jesus. If that's the case, then the supporting evidence corroborates the Bible's claim of the resurrection of Jesus. The crucifixion was confirmed by the Jewish historian Josephus, the Roman historian Tacitus, and Lucian, the Greek satirist. The crucifixion of Jesus was a widely known event, just like the splitting of the moon. Yet, we have outside supporting evidence for this event that the Quran denies, by the way, but no supporting outside evidence for the astronomical splitting of the moon that the Quran affirms. Don't you find that interesting? Muslims, if you're ready to stake your eternity on the claims of the Quran without any supporting outside or historical evidence, then would you be open to viewing the claims of the Bible, as well as the strong physical and historical evidence?